Hello. This week's YouTube Pagan Challenge is discussing cultural influences. And I'm going to say for me, um, that is a hard question for me to answer. One, because I do not practice the um, witchcraft of my ancestors, I would say. My mother's family is from the Caribbean. Her mother's mother, my grandmother's mother came from Trinidad, and and my grandmother's father came from Barbados, and my mother's father, his parents came from Antigua. All of those are in the West Indies, Caribbean. My father's mother is from Central America. They're from Panama, and my father's father, my grandfather, my father's side, is half Indian, East Indian, and half Native American. His mother is Native American from the Wampanoag tribe, and his father's from India. On my grandmother's side, my mother's mother, her mother who came from Trinidad, her mother was Indian from India. Her family's from India. And I'm gonna say my biggest cultural influences, if that then, is from Trinidad. There is a big mix of culture in Trinidad. Um, uh, uh, Obviously, there's a lot of slaves. A lot of the slaves that they had in Trinidad actually came from the Gold Coast in Africa, which was typically a place where they tried not to get slaves from. So many of the slaves in America would not have come from that part of Africa, or they would try not to import slaves from there because they found them to be rebellious. But they did import them to the Caribbean, and to Trinidad was one of those places. Trinidad and I assume probably Tobago, and but one of the things that was practiced in Trinidad was once they brought those slaves over from Africa, from that area, from that region, and I can't remember some of the tribes from there, but they, again, much like in America, they blended their beliefs with the Christian faith, so to speak, more to disguise it than anything else. And eventually it became known as one of them, one of the paths became known as Obia. Eventually, Obia became less of a religion, more of a practice, like witchcraft. They tend to be healers. You would go to them for healing, for removal of curses, evil eye, to put the evil eye on people, to things like that. Growing up, my grandmother always spoke about Obia, but not with reverence, but with fear. Um, One of her comments she would always make about my mother, whenever my stepfather did something that clearly my grandmother's like, why the hell is she still with this man? She would always say to me, I think he did Obia on your mother. I think he sprinkled her with, she called it goofy dust, but it's goofer dust, or gopher dust. But she would call it goofy dust. But anyways, and so she never spoke of it as a practice one should do. She always saw it as something evil. And so I never looked into that either until, you know what? Until fairly recently, until I started seeing some videos about this topic. And I decided to, hey, my grandmother we mentioned Obia because I looked at it briefly, but never like delved in or tried to find out the history of it or anything. I just actually looked it up to see if it was a real thing because my grandmother had this knack for telling me things that it's superstition or legend, but it's not. It doesn't have to necessarily be real, you know. So I just looked it up a few years back just to see if this was an actual thing, and it is. but I never went further into it until recently. But what I want to say about this topic is, and I know cultural appropriation has come up in some of the videos for this, but also I've seen past videos talking about. I remember a while back there was a big thing in the community about cultural appropriation. My problem with the idea of cultural appropriation is I am a believer in reincarnation. I believe we have had many lives in the past. And believing that, I feel that sometimes you are connected to a culture with no explanation. You may feel a connection to some kind of culture and not know why, because to you, this is not a culture of your now life, of your ancestors, so to speak. Growing up, I have always felt a connection to Native American cultures and to even East Indian cultures. And this is before I really knew about my family history. At that point, all I really knew was that my family came from the Caribbean and Central America. And nobody knew about my grandfather's side, my father's side, because he was always a closed person. And I've never had contact with him up until 3 years ago, 4 years ago. He re-entered my life, and we speak occasionally on the phone, and sometimes we're on the phone for a good long time. And so I asked him about his family and his parents, and he told me that beyond his mother and father, I don't think he knows more about that history. But his mother was of the Wampanoag tribe, and his father was from India, or his family was from India. I don't know if he was first generation born here, but so I mean, but I've always had that connection, and that spoke to me. And so when he told me his mother was Native American, that was like an aha moment for me. I knew about the East Indian connection on my grandmother's side because she would tell me it growing up as a child. So I wasn't too like, where am I getting this want to know about this culture, to identify with it? But then when he told me his father too is East Indian, then it was like, oh my gosh, it's on both sides. That's even stronger connection. As far as Egyptian or ancient Egypt, I've always had an affinity with ancient Egypt. And I've had past life readings, and for those who don't believe in it and you think it's like hokum, that's fine. But I believed in them. And in at least two of them, I was told that I had a connection to ancient Egypt. In two of them, in at least one of them, I was a priestess of some sort. I want to say it was a priestess to Hathor, or was it Bast? That I think it was Hathor. Yes. Anyways, so when it comes to that idea of cultural appropriation, I feel that if you have a connection, I feel that you have a right to look into that. And if that is something you feel you need to adopt into your practice, then why should you not? However, what I would recommend is do the research and delve deeper than the internet. Don't just surface look, because there's much more deeper into that. So I'm going to suggest basically buy books. Now, of course, you want to buy books. You'll buy books obviously based upon religion or with a pagan connection, and that is totally fine. Here I have at least two books, well, three books really, about Isis. These two are written by the same author, and it's Isadora Forrest. At least I'm saying Forrest because it looks like Forrest to me. She wrote Isis Magic, and she wrote Offerings to Isis. I believe she was actually a part of the Fellowship of Isis. I can't remember because it was a while back when I read information about her, but I think so. This book is all about offerings to Isis. That is it. This book gives you information about Isis, her religion, her worship, how to become a devotee to Isis, a priest of Isis, and things like that. let me skip. This is another book about Isis, which this I highly, highly recommend this book and this book. You don't even need to have this book because these two books talk about different offerings to Isis. So you don't even have to have this book. And I absolutely love this book too. And this book has rituals in it. This one has two, and I think it even has recipe for Kifi incense, and I'm probably saying it wrong. I can't remember, but The Mysteries of Isis, if you want more information about this, I did do a review on it a long time ago. Other books that I have is The Shamanic Mysteries of Egypt, because again, I was interested in that Native American culture, but Egyptian culture and shamanism spans different cultural divides. So this was a very interesting book. I thought this was great and I loved it, and I would recommend this book. And I can do reviews on any of these books if you would like. I cannot do a book review on this book because I've not finished reading this book, but this is The Passion of Isis and Osiris. And there's another book of Isis and Thoth that just came out recently that I'm saving money to buy because I'm on a budget now. And so I'm saving money when I want to buy particular things. But these books are obviously all pagan references, pagan books on how to honor these deities and things like that. I would also recommend reading historical books. I absolutely love this book, Daughters of Isis, and this talks about the role of women in ancient Egypt. You know, find out information about the culture itself outside of just the worship of whatever deity you are interested in, but learn about the culture. This discusses the role of women in anywhere from, I don't know, like housewives, queens, priestesses, and there's pictures inside too of artifacts and reliefs and things like that. Yes, I would definitely recommend this. This is a textbook, okay? This is The Complete Gods and Goddesses of Ancient Egypt. So this is a scholarly text. So I would always recommend getting a scholarly text as well. As far as Ganesh, like I said, Ganesh was my patron deity at one time, so I bought this book, Loving Ganesh, which this book discusses everything about Ganesh and how to honor him. And you'll see some Sanskrit in here. Yeah, the book is funky. Like part way through, it's upside down. I don't know. I don't know if all the editions are like that. But this tells you about offerings to Ganesh, mythology, and then here we have Hindu gods and goddesses. So, yes, do your research. That's basically all I have to say about cultural influences. Thank you for watching, and blessed be.